The morning Sarah Bennington buried her sister and brother-in-law, the Arizona sky burned so blue it seemed cruel, as if the heavens themselves had forgotten how to mourn. She stood at the edge of the small cemetery outside Prescott, her black dress collecting dust from the dry September wind of 1882, while her 5-year-old niece Emily clung to her skirts with fingers that wouldn't let go. The fever that had swept through town had taken Margaret and Thomas within days of each other, leaving Sarah at 23 years old with a general store to run, a child to raise, and a heart so fractured she wasn't sure it would ever beat properly again. The preacher's words drifted over her like smoke, meaningless and insubstantial. Sarah couldn't focus on talk of heaven and God's plan when Emily kept whispering "Mama" into the fabric of her dress, and Sarah had to keep whispering back that Mama was sleeping, even though they both knew it was a lie that would have to be corrected soon. Margaret had been more than Sarah's older sister. She had been her best friend, her confidant, the person who had helped raise her after their own parents died when Sarah was 16. Now Margaret was gone, and Sarah felt like she was 16 again, lost and terrified. Except this time, she had a child depending on her. After the service, neighbors brought food to the small house behind the general store where Sarah had lived alone until 3 days ago. Mrs. Henderson patted her hand and said, "Time heals all wounds." Mr. Parker offered to help with the store's books. Everyone meant well, but their sympathy felt like stones in her pockets, weighing her down when she needed to stay afloat for Emily's sake. The little girl sat in the corner of the parlor, her blonde curls tangled, her blue eyes empty in a way that made Sarah's chest ache. Emily hadn't cried since her father died. She had just gone quiet, like a candle flame blown out. By evening, everyone had left, and Sarah sat on the floor beside Emily, pulling the child into her lap. "I know you're scared," she whispered against Emily's hair. "I'm scared too. But we have each other, and we're going to be all right. I promise you that." Emily looked up at her with those devastating blue eyes. "Are you my mama now?" Sarah's throat closed. "I'm your Aunt Sarah, but I'm going to take care of you just like your mama did. I'm going to love you just like she did. You're going to stay with me forever and ever." Forever and ever? Forever and ever. That night, Sarah lay awake in Margaret's bed with Emily curled against her side and wondered how she was going to keep that promise. The general store barely turned enough profit to keep one person fed and clothed. Now there were two. Emily would need shoes and dresses and schooling and medicine and 1,000 other things Sarah couldn't begin to calculate. The house needed repairs. The store needed inventory. And Sarah needed help, though she had no idea where to find it. She must have fallen asleep eventually because she woke to weak sunlight filtering through the curtains and Emily's small hand patting her cheek. "Aunt Sarah, I'm hungry." Those simple words steadied her somehow. Emily was hungry. That was something Sarah could fix. She got up, braided Emily's hair, helped her dress in a simple calico dress that was already getting too small, and took her across the dusty yard to the general store. The building was single-story, wood frame, with a false front that made it look taller than it was. Thomas had built it 5 years ago, and it had been his pride and joy. Now it was Sarah's responsibility. She unlocked the door and breathed in the familiar scents of coffee, tobacco, leather, and soap. The morning light slanted through the windows, illuminating shelves stocked with canned goods, bolts of fabric, tools, ammunition, and medicines. Sarah had been helping Margaret and Thomas run the store since they opened it, so she knew the inventory and the customers, but knowing and managing were two different things. She made Emily breakfast in the small back room, where they kept a stove and a table, then opened the store for business. The bell over the door chimed steadily throughout the morning, as customers came in for flour and sugar and nails and thread. Sarah smiled and made change and wrapped purchases in brown paper, while Emily sat on a stool behind the counter, coloring on the backs of old receipts with a pencil stub. Around noon, the bell chimed again, and Sarah looked up from measuring out coffee beans to see a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. His hat was dusty brown, his shirt faded blue, and his boots worn but well cared for. He had dark hair that needed cutting, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He looked to be about 25 or 26, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made Sarah suddenly aware of the flour dust on her own dress. "Morning," he said, his voice low and pleasant. "I'm looking for work. Heard in town that Thomas Bennington might need help with freight hauling." Sarah's hand stilled on the coffee scoop. "Thomas passed away last week. Fever." The man's expression shifted immediately to genuine sorrow. "I'm real sorry to hear that, ma'am. I didn't know. Thomas was a good man. He helped me out a few years back when I first came through Prescott." "You knew him?" "Just briefly. I was passing through, got thrown from my horse and broke my arm. Thomas let me sleep in his barn while I healed up. Wouldn't take any payment. I told him if I was ever back this way, I'd repay the favor." He glanced around the store. "I'm guessing you could use some help around here now." Sarah wanted to say yes immediately. The freight order was due in 2 days, and it would be heavy, too heavy for her to unload alone. The store's back steps needed fixing before someone broke an ankle. The shelves needed rearranging. There were a dozen tasks she couldn't manage on her own, but she had no money to pay anyone. "I appreciate the offer," she said carefully, "but I can't afford to hire help right now." "I wasn't asking for money." He met her eyes steadily. "I owed Thomas a debt. Seems only right to pay it to his widow." "I'm not his widow. I'm his sister-in-law, Sarah Bennington." She paused. "This is my niece, Emily. I'm raising her now." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. "Cole Jameson, and my offer stands. You got work that needs doing, I can do it. When things get easier for you, we can talk about wages. Until then, I'm just paying back what I owe." Pride told Sarah to refuse. Common sense told her to accept. She looked at Emily, who was watching Cole with solemn curiosity, then back at Cole. His offer seemed genuine, and she was desperate enough to take a chance. "All right," she said. "There's a freight wagon coming Thursday. If you can help me unload and stock it, that would be appreciated. And if you're handy with a hammer, the back steps are about to fall apart." "I can do that." He touched the brim of his hat. "I'll come by Wednesday to look at those steps. And ma'am, I really am sorry for your loss." After he left, Sarah realized her heart was beating a little faster than usual, and she told herself it was just relief at having help, nothing more. Cole showed up early Wednesday morning with a toolbox and a quiet competence that Sarah found reassuring. He examined the steps, made a list of materials he'd need, and walked back into the store to get them. Sarah tried to insist he take them without charge, but he refused, paying in cash with money he said he'd earned doing odd jobs around town. While he worked, Emily wandered outside and sat on the ground nearby, watching him with the same solemn curiosity as before. Cole didn't seem bothered by her presence. He worked steadily, measuring and sawing and hammering, occasionally glancing over to make sure Emily wasn't getting into trouble. After about an hour, Emily spoke up. "My papa used to build things." Cole paused, hammer in hand. "Did he?" "He built a dollhouse for me. Mama put curtains in it." "That sounds real nice." "They're sleeping now, forever and ever." Cole set down the hammer and looked at Emily fully. His expression was gentle but not pitying, which Sarah appreciated from where she watched through the back window. "That must make you real sad." "Aunt Sarah says we have each other." "Your Aunt Sarah is right. That's real important, having each other." Emily considered this, then went back to drawing in the dirt with a stick. Cole went back to work. Sarah felt something tight in her chest loosen just slightly. By the time the freight wagon arrived the Thursday afternoon, Cole had fixed the steps, reorganized the storeroom, and helped Sarah go through Thomas's paperwork to figure out which bills were most urgent. He approached each task with the same steady focus, never complaining, never asking for thanks. He spoke when spoken to, but didn't fill the silence with meaningless chatter, which Sarah found restful. She'd had enough meaningless words at the funeral to last a lifetime. The freight hauler was a gruff man named Morrison, who had no patience for delays. He and Cole unloaded crate after crate of goods, everything from canned peaches to pickaxes, while Sarah checked items off her list and directed where things should go. The work took hours in the September heat, and by the end, both men were drenched in sweat. Sarah paid Morrison, then brought Cole a dipper of cool water from the well. "Thank you," she said. "I couldn't have managed that alone." He drank deeply, then handed back the dipper. "Happy to help." "Will you stay for supper? It's the least I can do." Cole hesitated, and Sarah could see him weighing whether accepting would be appropriate or forward. Finally, he nodded. "That would be nice. Thank you." Sarah made a simple meal of salt pork, beans, cornbread, and canned tomatoes. They ate in the kitchen while Emily chattered about a bird she'd seen that afternoon, her voice more animated than it had been in days. Cole listened attentively, asking questions that made Emily glow with importance. Sarah watched them and felt something she hadn't expected to feel again so soon, a small flicker of warmth, of possibility. After Emily went to bed, Cole helped Sarah wash the dishes, and they talked in the quiet, comfortable way of people who didn't need to fill every silence. He told her he'd been working as a ranch hand for the past few years, moving from place to place, but he was tired of drifting. He was thinking about settling down, finding a permanent place. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about coming west with Margaret and Thomas after their parents died, about how strange it felt to suddenly be responsible for a child when she'd barely figured out how to be responsible for herself. "You're doing better than you think," Cole said, drying the last plate. "Emily's lucky to have you." "I'm not sure about that. I don't know the first thing about raising a child." "You love her. That's the most important thing." He set the plate on the shelf. "The rest, you'll figure out as you go. Is that how it works?" "That's how everything works." He smiled then, a real smile that changed his whole face, and Sarah felt her breath catch. She walked him to the door, suddenly awkward in a way she hadn't been all evening. "Will you come back tomorrow? I could use help getting all those crates unpacked and the goods on the shelves." "I'll be here." After he left, Sarah stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the stars emerge over the dark shapes of the mountains. She was exhausted and grieving and overwhelmed, but for the first time since Margaret died, she didn't feel quite so alone. Cole came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. He never asked for payment, though Sarah insisted on feeding him at least one meal a day. He worked on whatever needed doing, always competent, always reliable, and gradually he became a fixture in Sarah's new life. Emily began following him around like a shadow, chattering about everything and nothing, and Cole bore it with patience and even seemed to enjoy it. 2 weeks after the funeral, Sarah was working on the store's books when she realized she had no idea how she was going to pay next month's bills. She'd been so focused on getting through each day that she hadn't been thinking ahead. Now she forced herself to add up the numbers, and they didn't add up to anything good. The store brought in enough to cover basic expenses, but there was nothing extra for emergencies or repairs or Emily's growing wardrobe, and Sarah had no savings. Everything had gone into keeping the store afloat. She must have made some sound of distress because Cole, who was stocking shelves nearby, looked over. "Something wrong?" Sarah rubbed her temples. "Just numbers that don't work out the way I need them to." He set down the box he was holding and came over. "Can I help?" She should have said no. The store's finances were private business, but she was desperate, and Cole had proven himself trustworthy, so she turned the ledger so he could see it. "I'm bringing in enough to cover the mortgage and basic supplies, but barely. If anything unexpected happens, if Emily gets sick, or the building needs major repairs, or I lose customers to the new mercantile on Main Street, I'm finished." Cole studied the numbers with a focus that surprised her. "You're not charging enough." "What?" "Your prices are too low. Look, you're selling flour at cost, barely marking up anything. Same with the dry goods. Thomas could afford to do that because he had the freight business on the side. But you don't. You need to raise your prices. People will go to the other store. Some might, but you have customers who've been coming here for years because they trust you. They'll pay a little more for that trust." He pointed to another column. "And you're extending too much credit. Half the town owes you money. You need to collect on these debts." "They're my neighbors. They'll pay when they can. And you'll be out of business before they do." He met her eyes. "I know it feels hard, but you have to think of Emily now. You need this store to survive." Sarah knew he was right, but it didn't make it easier. The next day she raised her prices by 10% and stopped extending new credit. Some customers grumbled, but most accepted it. Within a week, 2 people came in to pay off their old debts. Sarah felt like she could breathe a little easier. Cole continued coming around, and Sarah continued feeding him, and gradually she began to notice things about him that had nothing to do with his usefulness. The way his eyes crinkled when Emily made him laugh. The way he always held doors for her and carried heavy things without being asked. The way he smelled of soap and leather and something warm she couldn't name. the way her heart beat faster when she heard his footsteps on the porch. She told herself it was too soon, that she was just grateful, that she was confusing relief with attraction. But late at night, lying in bed with Emily sleeping beside her, she admitted the truth to herself. She was falling for Cole Jameson, and she had no idea what to do about it. October arrived with cooler temperatures and clear skies. Emily started attending the small schoolhouse in town, which gave Sarah more time to focus on the store, but also made her realize how much she'd come to rely on the child's presence. The hours Emily was at school felt empty and too quiet. Sarah found herself watching the clock, waiting for the afternoon when Emily would burst through the door with stories about her teacher and the other children. Cole noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "You miss her," he said one morning when Sarah checked the clock for the third time. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone paying attention." He was fixing a wobbly shelf, his hands steady on the tools. "It's good, though. Shows Emily she's loved." "I do love her, more than I expected to, if I'm being honest. When Margaret first had her, I didn't really understand the appeal of children. They seemed loud and messy and exhausting. But Emily is—" She trailed off, not sure how to put it into words. "She's easy to love," Cole finished. "Got her mama's sweet nature, I'd guess." "Yes, Margaret was like that, kind to everyone." Sarah paused, then said something she'd been thinking about for days. "You never talk about your family." Cole's hand stilled on the shelf. "Not much to talk about. Everyone has family somewhere. Not everyone." He went back to work, and Sarah could tell the subject was closed. But that night, after Emily was asleep and they were sitting on the porch in the cool darkness, Cole spoke into the silence. "My parents died when I was 12. Cholera. I didn't have any other family, so I ended up in an orphanage in St. Louis. Ran away when I was 14. Been on my own since." His voice was matter of fact, but Sarah could hear the old pain underneath. "So no, I don't have family. Haven't for a long time." Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it hurt less." He looked at her then, and even in the darkness, she could see the surprise in his eyes, as if no one had ever acknowledged that before. "No," he said quietly. "I guess it doesn't." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the distant sounds of the town settling in for the night. Then Sarah said, "You know, Emily considers you family now. She told me yesterday that you're her favorite person, except for me." Cole's breath caught. "She said that?" "She did, and Sarah gathered her courage. "I'm glad you're here, Cole. Not just because you help with the store. I'm glad because you're you." She couldn't see his face clearly in the darkness, but she heard the emotion in his voice when he said, "I'm glad I'm here too, Sarah. More glad than you know." The next day was a Sunday, which meant the store was closed. Sarah usually spent Sundays doing laundry and cooking for the week ahead, but Cole showed up after church and asked if she and Emily wanted to go on a picnic. Sarah's first instinct was to say no, that she had too much to do, but Emily's face lit up with such joy that Sarah couldn't refuse. They rode in Cole's wagon to a spot he knew by the creek, about a mile outside town. The cottonwood trees were turning gold, and the water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Emily immediately began hunting for interesting rocks, while Sarah spread a blanket and unpacked the food she'd brought, fried chicken and biscuits and apple preserves. Cole lay back on the blanket with his hat over his face, looking more relaxed than Sarah had ever seen him. She sat beside him, watching Emily splash in the shallow water, and felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness she hadn't felt since before Margaret died. "This is nice," she said. Cole pushed his hat back to look at her. "It is. Thank you for suggesting it. I didn't realize how much I needed to get out of town. Everyone needs a break sometimes." He sat up, his shoulder close to hers. "You work too hard, Sarah. I don't have a choice. Maybe not, but you can still take an afternoon off now and then." He was looking at her intently now, and Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "You deserve good things, happiness, peace, all of it. So do you. Maybe we both do." The air between them felt charged, electric. Sarah knew if she leaned in just slightly, Cole would kiss her. She could see the desire in his eyes, carefully restrained but unmistakable. And she wanted him to kiss her, wanted it with an intensity that startled her. But Emily was right there, and Sarah wasn't sure if she was ready. Wasn't sure if it was too soon. Wasn't sure of anything except that her heart was pounding, and Cole's eyes were the most beautiful color she'd ever seen. Emily saved her from having to make a decision by running over with a fistful of wet stones. "Aunt Sarah, look! This one is shaped like a heart." Sarah forced herself to look away from Cole and focus on the rock Emily was holding up. It did indeed look rather heart-shaped. "That's lovely, sweetheart. You should keep it." Emily beamed and ran off to find more treasures. Cole cleared his throat and lay back down, hat over his face again. But Sarah noticed his hand was resting on the blanket between them, palm up, as if in invitation. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused and solid, and they stayed like that for the rest of the afternoon, not speaking, just holding on. That night, after Emily was asleep, Cole walked Sarah back to the house from the wagon. They stood on the porch, and Sarah didn't want him to leave. She wanted to invite him in for coffee, wanted to keep talking, wanted to feel his hand in hers again. But it was late, and propriety demanded he go, so she just said, "Thank you for today. Emily had a wonderful time." "Just Emily?" Sarah smiled. "I did too." "Good." He took a step closer, and Sarah's breath caught. "Sarah, I need to say something, and I'm not good with words, so I'm just gonna say it plain. I care about you, more than I probably should after such a short time. But I do, and if you want me to step back, if this is too much or too soon, I will. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I'd like to see where this could go." Sarah's heart was racing. "Cole, you don't have to answer now. I just wanted you to know." "I do feel it," she said quickly, before she could lose her courage. "I've been feeling it for weeks. I thought I was imagining it, or that it was too soon after Margaret's death, or that I was just grateful for your help. But it's more than that. I care about you too." The smile that spread across Cole's face was like sunrise. "Yeah? Yeah." He reached up and cupped her cheek with one hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. But Sarah didn't want to change her mind. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to feel alive again after weeks of grief and fear and exhaustion. When his lips met hers, soft and warm and careful, she felt something inside her crack open, like ice breaking in spring. The kiss was brief and sweet and perfect. When Cole pulled back, his eyes were searching hers. "All right?" "Very all right." He kissed her again, a little deeper this time, and Sarah let herself sink into it, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating as fast as hers, could feel the restrained strength in his body, could feel how much he wanted her, and how carefully he was holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he whispered. "I know, but I don't want to." "I know that too." He kissed her once more, quick and hard, then stepped back. "I'll see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Sarah agreed. She watched him walk away into the darkness, then went inside and leaned against the closed door, her fingers touching her lips. She was smiling, she realized. Actually smiling for the first time since Margaret died, and it felt like betrayal and blessing all at once. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Cole came by every day, ostensibly to help with the store, but really because neither of them could bear to be apart. They were careful around Emily, keeping their affection subtle, but the child wasn't fooled. One evening she looked up from her supper and said, "Are you going to marry Mr. Cole?" Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "What makes you ask that?" "You smile at him the way Mama used to smile at Papa." Sarah met Cole's eyes across the table and saw her own panic and amusement reflected there. "Would that bother you?" Cole asked Emily gently. "If your Aunt Sarah and I got married?" Emily considered this seriously. "Would you live with us?" "I would." "And would you still take me fishing like you did last week?" "Every Sunday if you want." "Then I think it's a good idea." Emily went back to her beans as if she'd just solved a complex problem. Mama used to say 2 hearts are better than one alone. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. That sounded exactly like something Margaret would say. Cole reached under the table and squeezed her hand. "Your mama was a smart lady," he said to Emily. "I know. Aunt Sarah, can I have more cornbread?" Later, after Emily was in bed, Sarah and Cole sat on the porch steps. "She's not wrong," Cole said quietly. "About getting married, I mean." Sarah's pulse jumped. "Cole, I'm not proposing right now. I know it's too soon, We haven't been courting nearly long enough, but I want you to know that's where I'm headed. I love you, Sarah. I love Emily. I want to build a life with you both." Sarah turned to look at him, this good man who had appeared in her life exactly when she needed him most. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't expect to, didn't think I was ready, but I do." Cole pulled her close and kissed her hair. "We don't have to rush anything. We have time." But time, it turned out, had its own ideas. The next morning, a well-dressed man walked into the store and introduced himself as Leonard Hutchins, a lawyer from Tucson. He asked to speak with Sarah privately, and something in his tone made her stomach drop. She left Cole in charge of the counter and took Mr. Hutchins to the back room. "Miss Bennington," he began, "I represent the estate of Thomas and Margaret Bennington. I'm afraid there's been a complication." Sarah's hands went cold. "What kind of complication?" "Before their deaths, your sister and brother-in-law took out a substantial loan from a bank in Tucson to expand their freight business. The loan was secured by this building and the property it stands on. The payments are now in arrears, and the bank is threatening to foreclose." The room seemed to tilt. "How much?" $300 plus accumulated interest. Total of $340 due within 30 days. Sarah couldn't breathe. $340 might as well be $3 million. She had maybe $20 in savings. "I didn't know about any loan. It was legitimate, I assure you. I have all the paperwork here." He opened his briefcase and pulled out documents that Sarah couldn't focus on because her vision was swimming. "I'm sorry to bring you this news, Miss Bennington. If you can't raise the money, you'll need to vacate the property by the end of November." After he left, Sarah sat in the back room with her head in her hands, trying not to cry. Everything she'd worked for, everything Margaret and Thomas had built, was about to be taken away. And Emily would lose her home on top of losing her parents. Sarah had promised to take care of her, and she was failing. Cole found her there 10 minutes later. She told him everything, her voice shaking. He listened without interrupting, then said, "We'll figure it out." "There's nothing to figure out. I don't have that kind of money. Even if I sold everything in the store, I couldn't raise $300 in 30 days. "Then we'll find another way." "There is no other way, Cole." Sarah looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to lose everything." Cole knelt in front of her and took her hands. "No, you're not. I have money saved. Not all of it, but some. And we can ask the bank for an extension. We can sell things. I can take extra work. We'll do whatever it takes. But you're not losing this store, and you're not losing Emily's home. I won't let that happen." "You'd give me your savings?" "In a heartbeat. Sarah, don't you understand? Your problems are my problems now. We're in this together." He squeezed her hands. "Two hearts are better than one alone, remember?" Despite everything, Sarah felt a small laugh escape. "Emily told you that. And she was right. We'll get through this together." Over the next week, they did everything they could think of. Cole withdrew his savings, which amounted to $120, every penny he'd earned over the past several years. Sarah went through the store and the house, setting aside anything valuable to sell. She found some of Thomas's tools, Margaret's good china, a silver watch that had belonged to their father. It hurt to part with these things, but survival mattered more than sentiment. They went to the bank in town and explained the situation, asking for an extension on the loan. The banker was sympathetic but firm. The note was held by a bank in Tucson, not his institution, and he had no authority to negotiate terms. If Sarah couldn't pay, she'd have to take it up with them directly. So Sarah and Cole made the trip to Tucson, leaving Emily with Mrs. Henderson. The journey took 2 days by wagon, and they stayed in a modest boarding house that Cole insisted on paying for. Sarah felt guilty about him spending his money, but he wouldn't hear any arguments. The bank in Tucson was imposing, all dark wood and serious-faced clerks. They waited for an hour to see the bank manager, a man named Grayson, who looked at them with about as much warmth as a snake. Sarah explained the situation, pleaded for an extension, promised to pay interest on top of interest. Grayson listened without expression, then shook his head. "The note is in default. We want our money." "I just need more time," Sarah said desperately. "I've given you 30 days. That's more than generous. But I'm raising a child, my niece. If you foreclose, we'll have nowhere to go. That's unfortunate, but not my concern. Business is business, Miss Bennington." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "You have until the end of November. Good day." On the ride back to Prescott, Sarah couldn't stop the tears. Cole drove in grim silence, his jaw tight with anger. Finally, he said, "There has to be another way. What if we went to the townspeople, explain the situation, ask for loans or investments in the store? No one has that kind of money, Cole. We're talking about over $200 still needed. That's more than most families see in a year. Then we'll think of something else." But Sarah couldn't see what else there was. She'd exhausted every option. The store, the house, everything was going to be taken, and she'd have to start over with nothing. The thought of telling Emily was unbearable. When they got back to Prescott, Mrs. Henderson was waiting with news that made everything worse. Two of Sarah's regular customers had decided to take their business to the new Mercantile on Main Street, saying the prices were better. Sarah felt like she was watching a house collapse one beam at a time. That night, Cole held her while she cried. They were sitting on the porch, and Emily was asleep inside, and Sarah just let go of everything she'd been holding in. Cole didn't try to make it better or tell her it would be fine. He just held her and let her break, which was exactly what she needed. When the tears finally stopped, Sarah pulled back and wiped her face. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I've made such a mess of things." "No, you haven't. Life made a mess, and you're doing the best you can." Cole brushed her hair back from her face. "Sarah, I want to tell you something. I've been thinking about it since Tucson, and I need to say it." "What?" "Marry me." Sarah's breath caught. "What?" "I know it's not the most romantic proposal, and I know the timing is terrible, but marry me, right away this week. If we're married, we're partners legally. Your debts become my debts. Your property becomes my property. We combine everything we have, and maybe that gives us more options. Maybe that helps. Cole, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering." He took her hands. "And I'm not just doing it because of the money. I love you. I want to marry you anyway. This just means we do it sooner rather than later. But if we get married and still lose the store, you lose everything too. Then we lose it together and start over together." He smiled a bit crookedly. "Two hearts are better than one alone, right?" Sarah wanted to say no, wanted to tell him he was being foolish, that he shouldn't tie himself to her and her problems. But the truth was, she wanted to marry him. She wanted it desperately, wanted to wake up beside him every morning and face life with him at her side. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe combining their resources would open doors she couldn't see alone. "All right," she whispered. "All right. Yes, I'll marry you." Cole let out a whoop of joy and kissed her so hard they both nearly fell off the porch steps. When they finally broke apart, both laughing breathlessly, Sarah felt something she'd thought lost forever. Hope. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the church, with Emily as their witness and Mrs. Henderson and the preacher's wife standing as attendants. Sarah wore a simple blue dress, the nicest she owned, and carried wildflowers Emily had picked that morning. Cole wore clean trousers and a white shirt, his hair freshly cut. And when Sarah walked down the aisle toward him, the look in his eyes made her feel like the most beautiful woman alive. Emily stood beside them during the ceremony, holding Sarah's bouquet and beaming with pride. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Cole kissed Sarah gently while Emily clapped her hands. Afterward, Mrs. Henderson hosted a small celebration at her house with cake and tea, and various neighbors stopped by to offer congratulations. Sarah hadn't told anyone about their financial troubles, so everyone assumed this was just a happy occasion, a new beginning after tragedy. And maybe it was. Maybe love was always a new beginning, regardless of circumstances. That night, after Emily was asleep in her room, Sarah led Cole to the bedroom she'd been using, which had been Margaret and Thomas's before. She felt suddenly shy, nervous in a way she hadn't expected. Cole seemed to sense it. He cupped her face gently. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for." "I want to," Sarah whispered. "I'm just nervous." "Me too." "You are?" He smiled. "I've never been married before either. Never been with anyone I love like this." He kissed her softly. "We'll figure it out together." And they did. Slowly, gently, with whispered words and tender touches, they came together as husband and wife. It was awkward and sweet and perfect. And afterward, lying in Cole's arms in the darkness, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known was possible. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too, always will. Even if we lose the store? Even then, we're a family now, Sarah. You, me, and Emily. That's what matters most. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Cole already up and dressed. He kissed her awake and told her he had an idea, that he'd be back in a few hours. Sarah wanted details, but he was already heading out the door. She got up, dressed, helped Emily with breakfast, and tried not to worry. Cole returned around noon with a man Sarah had seen around town but didn't know personally. The man was introduced as Jack Sullivan, owner of a cattle ranch about 10 miles outside Prescott. Cole had apparently worked for him briefly the previous year. Cole tells me you're in a tight spot financially, Sullivan said, without preamble. Says you need to raise money fast. Sarah shot Cole a look. She wasn't sure how she felt about their private business being shared, but Cole just smiled encouragingly, so she said, "That's right. I have a proposition for you. I need someone to manage my ranch's books and supply purchases. My current man is moving back east, and I haven't found a replacement. The job pays $40 a month, and I can give you 3 months' pay in advance if you agree to a year's contract." Sarah's mind reeled. $120, right there. Why would you pay in advance? Because Cole vouches for you, and I trust Cole. He says you're honest and good with numbers. That's worth something to me. Sullivan pulled out a paper. Contract's here if you want to look it over. Sarah read through it carefully. The terms were reasonable, the salary fair. She'd have to go out to the ranch once a week to review accounts and place orders, but she could do that on a day when the store was closed. It wouldn't be easy managing both responsibilities, but it was possible. "All right," she said. "I'll do it." Sullivan counted out $120 in cash right there on the counter, then shook her hand. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mrs. Jameson. I'll expect you next Monday." After he left, Sarah turned to Cole with tears in her eyes. "How did you do this?" "I just asked. Figured the worst he could say was no." Cole grinned. "That's $240 we have now, Sarah. We're almost halfway there." Over the next 2 weeks, they sold everything they'd set aside. The tools went to a carpenter in town. The china went to a wealthy woman who collected such things. The watch went to a jeweler. It all added up to $78. Combined with what they already had, they now had $318. They were still $22 short. Sarah worked the store during the day and the ranch books at night, sleeping only a few hours and running on determination and coffee. Cole took every odd job he could find, fixing fences, hauling freight, breaking horses. Emily was passed between Sarah, Cole, and Mrs. Henderson like a treasured package, never complaining, always understanding. 5 days before the deadline, they were still $18 short. Sarah was starting to despair again when Emily came to her with her small coin purse, the one Margaret had given her for her birthday. "I have money," Emily said, "for the store." Sarah knelt down. "Oh, sweetheart, no. That's your money. But Mama said we're a family and families help each other." Emily opened the purse and poured out coins. $6.35, a small fortune to a 5-year-old. "I want to help." Sarah pulled Emily into a hug, crying again. "Thank you, baby. Thank you so much." The coins brought them to $324.35. They were now less than $16 short. So close, but still not enough. The answer came from an unexpected source. The afternoon before they were supposed to lose everything, a young couple walked into the store. Sarah had never seen them before. They introduced themselves as Peter and Annie Larson, newly arrived in Prescott. Peter was a carpenter, looking to set up a shop. "We heard you might be going out of business," Annie said apologetically. "We were wondering if you had any equipment or fixtures you'd be willing to sell." Sarah's heart sank. News had traveled fast. But then she looked around the store and realized she did have something to sell. The counter itself was a beautiful piece, built by Thomas from oak, with intricate carved details. It must have taken him weeks. She loved it, but survival mattered more than sentiment. "Would you be interested in buying the counter?" Peter examined it carefully, running his hands over the wood. "This is fine work. I could use something like this in my shop. How much?" Sarah had no idea what it was worth. She just said, $20. "Deal." They shook hands, and Peter said he'd come back the next day to dismantle and haul it away. After they left, Sarah felt like laughing and crying at the same time. They had done it. They'd actually done it. They had enough money to save the store. That evening, Cole rode to Tucson with $340 in his saddlebag. It was too risky to wait until the deadline tomorrow. He wanted the payment made and receipted while they still had time to dispute anything if needed. Sarah stayed behind with Emily, pacing the house, unable to settle. Cole returned late that night, exhausted but triumphant. He had the receipt showing the loan paid in full, the property deed free and clear. Sarah threw herself into his arms, and they held each other and laughed and cried at the same time. "We did it," Sarah kept saying. "We actually did it." "We did," Cole agreed. Together. Emily wandered out of her bedroom, rubbing her eyes. "What's happening?" Sarah scooped her up. "We get to stay in our home, sweetheart. We're going to be all right." Emily smiled sleepily and put her head on Sarah's shoulder. "I knew we would. Mr. Cole takes care of us." Over Emily's head, Sarah met Cole's eyes. "Yes, he does." Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Sarah managed the store and the ranch accounts. Cole took a permanent position as Sullivan's foreman, which meant better pay and steady work. They hired a young man named Timothy to help in the store during busy times, which freed Sarah up to spend more time with Emily and the household. The store began to thrive under their combined management. Word spread that the Jamesons were fair and honest, and customers started coming from neighboring towns. By Christmas, they were making enough profit to start saving again, building a cushion against future disasters. Emily flourished in her new family. The shadows in her eyes gradually faded, replaced by the bright joy of a child who knew she was loved. She called Cole Papa without anyone suggesting it, and Cole melted every time. He was patient and playful with her, teaching her to ride and fish and whittle, all the things a father would teach. One evening in late December, Sarah stood in the doorway watching Cole and Emily build a snowman in the yard. The first real snow of winter had fallen that morning, and Emily was bundled up like a little bear, shrieking with laughter as Cole chased her with a snowball. The sight filled Sarah's heart to bursting. Cole caught her watching and grinned. "Come out here. I'm making supper. Supper can wait. Come play with us." Sarah laughed and grabbed her coat. She stepped out into the cold, and Cole immediately pelted her with a snowball. She shrieked and retaliated, and soon all three of them were engaged in an all-out snow war, laughing until they couldn't breathe. Later, after Emily was in bed and they were warming up by the fire, Cole pulled Sarah into his lap. "Happy?" he murmured against her hair. "So happy it scares me." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be taken away." Cole turned her to face him. "Life doesn't work that way, Sarah. Bad things happen, yes, but good things happen too. We've earned this happiness. We fought for it. Don't be afraid to enjoy it." "How did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just a man who loves his wife and wants to see her smile." Sarah kissed him, slow and deep. "I love you, Cole Jameson." "Love you too, Mrs. Jameson." Christmas that year was the best Sarah could remember. They decorated the store and the house with pine branches and ribbon. Cole cut down a small tree and Emily helped decorate it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments. On Christmas morning, Emily woke them before dawn, bouncing with excitement over the simple gifts they had managed. A new dress from Sarah, a wooden horse Cole had carved, a book of fairy tales they had bought together. They went to church as a family, and Sarah felt Margaret's presence there, a gentle warmth that felt like approval. After the service, they had Christmas dinner with Mrs. Henderson and a few other friends, and Sarah realized how much their life had expanded. They weren't alone anymore. They had community, connection, people who cared about them. As winter turned to spring, Sarah began to suspect she might be pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses twice, and she was tired all the time, in a way that felt different from just working hard. She didn't say anything to Cole at first, wanting to be sure, but he noticed her hand resting on her stomach and the way she turned green at the smell of coffee. "Sarah?" he said one morning, catching her as she rushed outside to be sick. "Are you all right?" She wiped her mouth and looked up at him with a tremulous smile. "I think I might be expecting." The expression on Cole's face was worth everything they'd been through. Pure joy, mixed with wonder and a little bit of fear. "Really?" "I think so. I'm not certain, but the signs are there." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "A baby, our baby. Are you happy?" "Happy? Sarah, I'm so happy I could burst." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You've given me everything. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning. And now this. I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. You deserve all the happiness in the world," they told Emily that evening, keeping it simple. How would you feel about having a little brother or sister? Sarah asked. Emily's eyes went wide. Really? A real baby? A real baby. Sometime around the fall, we think. Emily threw her arms around Sarah's middle, then seemed to remember to be gentle. I'm going to be a big sister. You are. Do you think you'll be good at it? I'll be the best big sister ever. I'll teach the baby everything I know. Cole laughed. That's good, because your aunt and I are going to need all the help we can get. The months passed in a blur of preparations. Sarah continued working as long as she could, but eventually her swelling belly made it difficult to stand behind the counter all day. Cole hired Timothy full-time to manage the store, and Sarah shifted to doing the books from home. She sewed baby clothes and diapers, while Emily helped by tangling the thread and chattering about all the games she was going to teach the baby. In early September, Sarah's pain started in the middle of the night. Cole rode to fetch the midwife while Mrs. Henderson stayed with Sarah and Emily. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments Sarah thought she couldn't do it, but Mrs. Henderson held her hand and Cole's voice encouraged her. And finally, just before dawn, Sarah heard the lusty cry of a newborn. It's a boy, the midwife announced, placing the squirming bundle on Sarah's chest. Sarah looked down at her son, red-faced and perfect, and felt her heart expand in a way she hadn't known was possible. She'd loved Emily from the moment she took her in, but this was different. This was a life she and Cole had created together, a living symbol of their love. Cole came into the room moments later, having been banished during the final stages. His eyes were wet when he saw Sarah holding their son. Is he all right? Are you all right? We're perfect. Come meet your son. Cole sat carefully on the edge of the bed and took the baby in his arms with a wonder that made Sarah's throat tight. He's so small. What should we name him? Sarah asked. They'd discussed names, but hadn't decided on anything. Cole looked down at the baby, then at Sarah. What about Thomas, after your brother-in-law? Sarah felt tears spill over. Thomas? Yes, Thomas Cole Jameson. Thomas Cole, Cole repeated, testing it out. The baby yawned and Cole laughed. I think he approves. Emily was allowed in to meet her new brother a few minutes later. She climbed onto the bed carefully and peered at the baby with intense interest. He's really small. You were this small once, Sarah said. Was I really? You really were? Emily reached out and touched Thomas's tiny hand with one finger. The baby's fingers closed around hers reflexively, and Emily gasped with delight. He likes me. Of course he likes you. You're his big sister. Over the next few weeks, Sarah recovered, and life adjusted to include their newest member. Thomas was a good baby, eating well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Emily took her big sister duties seriously, helping fetch diapers and singing to Thomas when he fussed. Cole was a natural father, patient during the midnight feedings and colic episodes, always ready to rock Thomas back to sleep. One evening, in late October, Sarah was nursing Thomas while Cole and Emily played checkers at the table. Sarah looked around their small house, at her makeshift family, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. Everything they'd been through, the grief and fear and desperation, had led them here, to this moment, this peace. What are you thinking about? Cole asked, catching her watching them. Just how lucky I am. We're the lucky ones. Cole came over and kissed the top of her head, then Thomas's. You gave us everything. You gave me everything first. Then I guess we're even. Not quite. Sarah smiled up at him. I'm pretty sure I still owe you for that first day when you showed up and saved us. You don't owe me anything. I told you then. I was repaying a debt to Thomas. And now? Now I'm just a man loving his family. Emily looked up from the checkerboard. Papa, it's your turn. Right, sorry. Cole went back to the game, and Sarah watched him deliberately lose to Emily, who crowed with victory. As winter approached again, marking almost a year and a half since Sarah had taken in Emily, the store was prospering beyond what any of them had imagined. They'd expanded into mail-order business, shipping goods to remote ranches and mining camps. Cole had been promoted to part owner of Sullivan's Ranch, a reward for his hard work and smart management. They'd paid off every debt and had money in the bank for the first time in Sarah's life. But more than the financial security, they had something money couldn't buy. They had each other. They had love. They had a family built from tragedy and faith and stubborn determination. One Sunday afternoon in December, they took a wagon ride to the spot by the creek where Cole had taken them for a picnic over a year ago. The cottonwoods were bare now, but the water still ran clear. Emily ran ahead with Thomas bundled on Cole's back in a carrier he'd rigged. Sarah walked beside her husband, their hands linked, their breath making clouds in the cold air. "Remember when we first came here?" Sarah asked. "I remember everything about that day. I remember thinking I'd never wanted anything as much as I wanted to kiss you." "Why didn't you?" "I was scared. Scared you'd reject me. Scared I wasn't good enough. Scared of wanting something so much." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. "And now? Now I know that loving you was the bravest thing I ever did. And the best." He leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Sarah. Thank you for showing up when I needed you most. Thank you for believing in us." Emily ran back to them, cheeks pink from the cold. "Come on, I want to show Thomas the place where I found the heart rock." They followed her to the creek bank, and Emily chattered about that day, embellishing the story in the way children do. Thomas gurgled happily on Cole's back, trying to grab at the low-hanging branches. Sarah watched her family and felt the pieces of her broken heart settle into place, healed not by time, but by love. That evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah and Cole sat by the fire. Cole was whittling something, his hands steady and sure. Sarah was mending one of Emily's dresses, the domestic scene so different from the chaos of the previous year. "Cole," Sarah said into the comfortable silence, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come into the store that day? If you'd ridden past Prescott without stopping?" Cole set down his whittling and looked at her seriously. "All the time, and it terrifies me because I almost did ride past. I almost decided I'd paid my debt to Thomas with the work I did for him before, but something made me stop. Maybe it was fate or God or just dumb luck. But I stopped, and I found you, and my whole life changed. Mine too. Do you ever regret it, marrying me so fast, tying yourself to my fortunes?" "Never. Not for a single second." Sarah set down her mending. "You saved us, Cole. Not just with the money or the work, though that was important. You saved us by showing Emily that family doesn't end with blood. You saved me by reminding me that life goes on after loss. You gave us hope when we had none. You did the same for me. Before you, I was just drifting, working, sleeping, existing but not really living. You gave me a purpose, a home, a reason to stay in one place and build something that lasts." He reached over and took her hand. "I love you more now than I did when we got married, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. That's just how it works with you." Sarah moved to sit in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Two hearts really are better than one alone. Margaret was a wise woman. She would have liked you. Thomas would have too. I wish I could have known them better. They knew you saved their daughter and their store. That would have been enough for them." Sarah kissed him softly. "It's enough for me." They sat like that for a long time, holding each other in the firelight, not needing words. Outside, the December wind howled, but inside they were warm and safe and together. The years that followed were good ones. Emily grew into a bright, confident girl who did well in school and helped mind Thomas with the patience of someone who'd grown up fast. Thomas became a cheerful toddler who followed his big sister everywhere and worshipped his father. The store continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful businesses in Prescott. Cole's partnership in the ranch proved profitable, providing steady income even in lean years. In the spring of 1885, Sarah gave birth to their second child together, a daughter they named Margaret Rose, in honor of Sarah's sister. Emily, now 7 years old, was thrilled to have a baby sister and took her responsibilities seriously. Thomas, at 2, was less impressed, but eventually came around when Margaret started smiling at him. By the time Margaret was 6 months old, their house behind the store was bursting at the seams. So, Cole designed and built a new house on a piece of land just outside town, a real home with 4 bedrooms and a proper kitchen and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. They moved in on a crisp October day, and that night they sat on the new porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "We did it," Sarah said, leaning against Cole's shoulder while the children played in the yard. "We really did it. We did, though it wasn't always easy. No, but the hard times made this sweeter." Sarah looked up at him. "I wouldn't change anything, you know. Not the struggle, not the fear, none of it, because it brought us here. Me neither. Well, maybe I'd change the part where we almost lost the store. That was terrifying. Sarah laughed. That was terrifying, but we got through it. Together. Together! Emily called out that Thomas was trying to eat a bug, and Cole sighed and got up to intervene. Sarah watched him scoop up their son and patiently explain why bugs weren't food, while Emily giggled and Margaret cooed from her blanket. This was her life now, this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. Over the next several years, they continued building their legacy. Cole became a respected rancher and businessman, known for his fairness and hard work. Sarah expanded the store to include a small lending library and a post office, making it a true community hub. Emily graduated from the local school at the top of her class and began helping teach the younger children. Thomas showed an early aptitude for numbers and started helping with the ranch accounts before he was 10. Margaret was the baby, spoiled by everyone, but somehow remaining sweet-natured. In 1890, when Emily was 13, she asked Sarah about her real parents. They were sitting in the kitchen, snapping green beans, and the question came out of nowhere. "Do you think Mama and Papa would be proud of me?" Sarah's hands stilled. They didn't talk about Margaret and Thomas often, not because it was forbidden, but because the pain had softened into something gentler over the years, a sweet ache rather than a sharp stab. "They would be so proud of you, Emily. You're everything they could have hoped for. Smart and kind and strong. I don't remember them very well anymore. Sometimes I feel bad about that." "Don't feel bad. You were so young when they died. It's natural that the memories would fade. But I remember you and Papa. Every day with you two is clear." Sarah reached over and squeezed Emily's hand. "Your Mama and Papa gave you life, and 5 beautiful years. Cole and I got the privilege of watching you grow up. We're all your parents in different ways. And yes, Margaret and Thomas would be incredibly proud of the woman you're becoming." Emily smiled, a little watery. "I'm glad I have you and Papa. I know I'm not your real daughter, but you feel like my real mother." "You are my real daughter, Emily. Blood doesn't make a family, love does. And I've loved you since the moment I held you at the funeral and promised to take care of you. 2 hearts are better than one alone." "Exactly." Sarah pulled Emily into a hug. "We made it through together, and we're stronger for it." That evening, Sarah told Cole about the conversation. They were getting ready for bed, and Cole listened thoughtfully. "She's right, you know, about you being her real mother. Biology is just biology. You're the one who raised her, who taught her how to be strong and kind and brave. That's what makes you her mother. Sometimes I still feel like I'm pretending, like I'm not quite old enough or wise enough to be raising 3 children." Cole laughed and pulled her close. "I feel that way every day. But then I look at Emily and Thomas and Margaret, and I see these incredible people we're raising together, and I think maybe we're doing all right after all." "More than all right." "More than all right," he agreed, and kissed her until she forgot what they'd been talking about. In 1892, Emily fell in love with the son of a local rancher, a steady young man named David who treated her with respect and made her laugh. Cole was protective but fair, grilling the boy thoroughly before allowing him to court Emily properly. Sarah watched Cole struggle between wanting to keep Emily, his little girl, forever, and wanting her to have the same happiness he'd found. They were married in the spring of 1894, when Emily was 17 and David 19. It was a beautiful ceremony at the church, and Sarah cried through the whole thing while Cole stood stoic and rigid, his jaw tight with emotion. At the reception, Emily hugged them both fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For taking me in when you barely knew how to take care of yourselves. For loving me like I was yours from the start. For showing me what a real family looks like." "You made it easy to love you," Sarah said through tears. "I couldn't be prouder of you if you were my daughter by birth. You are my mother in every way that matters." Cole couldn't speak, just held Emily tight and kissed her forehead. When he finally let go, he shook David's hand and said gruffly, "You take care of her." "I will, sir, I promise." Watching Emily leave with her new husband, Sarah leaned into Cole. "Our baby is all grown up." "She's not a baby. She hasn't been for a long time." "I know, but I still remember that little 5-year-old clinging to my skirts at the funeral." "Me too." Cole wrapped an arm around her. "We did good with her." "We did, thanks to you." "Thanks to us. We were a team from the start." Thomas was 12 now, already as tall as Sarah, and showing signs of having Cole's build. He was quieter than his sisters, more introspective, but he had a gentle heart and a quick mind. He wanted to be a veterinarian, fascinated by animals and their care. Cole supported this dream, even though it meant Thomas would eventually have to go away for schooling. Margaret at 9 was all energy and opinions, constantly questioning everything and driving her teachers to distraction with her refusal to accept easy answers. She wanted to be a doctor, she announced one day, and neither Sarah nor Cole saw any reason to discourage her, even though female doctors were rare. "Why shouldn't I be a doctor?" Margaret demanded when Sarah gently suggested it might be difficult. "You run a business. Emily reads all those books. Why can't I be a doctor?" "You absolutely can be a doctor if that's what you want," Sarah said. "I was just warning you that some people might try to stop you because you're a girl. But if you're determined, you can do anything." "I am determined. Papa says determination is the most important thing." Sarah looked at Cole, who shrugged with a smile. "What? It's true." "You're raising a generation of confident women," Sarah said later, when they were alone. "Good. The world could use more of them." He pulled her close. "I learned from the best." In 1896, Sarah turned 37 and Cole turned 39. They'd been married for 14 years, together for 15. Sometimes Sarah still couldn't believe this was her life, that the desperate grieving woman who'd stood at her sister's grave had found this much happiness, that the drifting cowboy who'd shown up to repay a debt had built a legacy. They were sitting on their porch one evening in the late summer, watching the sunset and the children play in the yard. Thomas was teaching Margaret how to whistle. Their laughter carried on the warm breeze. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Sarah asked, "when you walked into the store?" "Sometimes. I think about how close I came to not stopping in Prescott at all. I almost rode straight through to California." "What made you stop?" "Honestly, I needed supplies, and Prescott was right there. Pure chance." "I don't think it was chance. I think it was meant to be." Cole smiled and took her hand. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we were always supposed to find each other, two lost souls who needed saving. You saved me. We saved each other." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "And I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. Every struggle, every fear, every moment of doubt, because it led me here, to you, to this life." "Two hearts are better than one alone," Sarah said softly. "Much better." Cole pulled her close. "I love you, Sarah Jameson. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." "I love you too, Cole. Always." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars appeared. Inside the house, their history lived in every room. Margaret's sampler hanging on the wall, stitched when she was still alive. Thomas's old tools in the shed. Emily's school books on the shelf. The children's drawings and toys and treasures. A life built from ashes and grief and stubborn love. The children came in as darkness fell, Thomas carrying a sleepy Margaret, while their own Thomas followed behind. They gathered in the parlor for their evening ritual, Cole reading aloud while Sarah mended and the children listened. Tonight, it was a collection of folk tales, and Cole read in his deep, steady voice while moths bumped against the lamp glass, and the night sounds of Arizona drifted through the open windows. Sarah watched her family and felt such gratitude it was almost overwhelming. She thought about Margaret and Thomas, buried in the cemetery outside town, and sent up a silent thank you. "Thank you for trusting me with Emily. Thank you for the life you built that became the foundation for mine. Thank you for being part of the story that brought me to Cole." As if sensing her thoughts, Cole looked up from the book and met her eyes across the room. The look said everything that didn't need words. "I love you. I'm glad you're here. We made it." Sarah smiled back. They had made it. Through grief and fear and desperation, through joy and growth and building something lasting, they'd taken broken pieces and built a family. They had learned that two hearts really were better than one alone, that love could grow from tragedy, that happy endings were possible even when they seemed impossible. Years continued to pass, as they do. Emily had children of her own, making Sarah and Cole grandparents at ages that seemed impossibly young. Thomas went off to school in California to study veterinary medicine, writing letters home that Sarah treasured. Margaret fought her way into a medical program back east, refusing to be discouraged by the men who told her she didn't belong there. The store remained a fixture in Prescott, now managed by a cousin of Cole's who'd moved out from Missouri. Sarah still kept the books, but had gradually stepped back from daily operations. Cole had sold his partnership in the ranch and bought a smaller spread closer to town, where he raised horses. They were comfortable, secure, surrounded by family and friends. In 1905, on their 23rd wedding anniversary, Cole took Sarah back to the spot by the creek where they'd had that first picnic. The cottonwoods were full and green now, and the water ran clear just like always. They spread a blanket and ate a simple lunch, and Cole gave her a present, a locket with a tiny painting inside showing their whole family. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, touching the delicate faces. "I wanted you to have something that showed how far we've come. From that first day when you were raising Emily alone, and I showed up with nothing but a debt to repay. Look at what we built." Sarah looked at the painting, at Emily and her husband and their 3 children, at Thomas with his veterinary degree, at Margaret in her medical school graduation photo, at the 2 of them in the center holding everything together. "We built something beautiful." "We did. And we're not done yet. We have years ahead of us still, years to watch our grandchildren grow, years to sit on the porch and remember it all. I look forward to every single one of those years, as long as they're with you." Cole kissed her then, sweet and familiar, and still thrilling after all this time. 2 hearts are better than one alone. "Always," Sarah agreed, "always." They lay back on the blanket and watched the clouds drift across the Arizona sky, the same sky that had burned so blue the day Sarah buried Margaret. But now it looked different. Now it looked like home, like promise, like the rest of their lives stretching out ahead of them, full of possibility. Emily's 5-year-old daughter came running up from where she'd been playing by the water, blonde curls bouncing just like Emily's had at that age. "Grandma! Grandpa! I found a rock shaped like a heart." Sarah sat up and accepted the rock, turning it over in her palm. It was indeed heart-shaped, smooth from the water. She looked at Cole and saw tears in his eyes. "Some things come full circle," he said quietly. "Some things do." They walked back to the wagon as the sun began to set, their granddaughter between them, each holding one of her small hands. Sarah thought about all the hands she'd held over the years. Margaret's when they were girls, Emily's at the funeral, and every day after. Cole's that first afternoon on the picnic blanket. Thomas and Margaret's as babies. Her grandchildren's now. Each connection had been a thread, weaving together to create the tapestry of her life. Some threads were shot through with grief and loss. Others glowed with joy and triumph, but all of them together made something beautiful, something strong, something that would last long after she was gone. That night, lying in bed beside Cole, Sarah said what she'd been thinking all day. "I'm so grateful for you, for that day you walked into the store and decided to stay, for every moment since then. I'm the grateful one. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted, a home, a family, a reason to stop drifting. We gave those things to each other." "Yes," Cole agreed, pulling her close. "Yes, we did." Outside their window, the Arizona night was full of stars. In other bedrooms, their children slept peacefully. In another house across town, Emily tucked her own children into bed. In California, Thomas was likely working late at his veterinary practice. In Pennsylvania, Margaret was studying for her exams, determined to prove herself. All of it had started with tragedy, with a fever that took 2 lives and left a woman alone with a child to raise. But from that tragedy had grown something magnificent, a love story, a family, a legacy of strength and determination, and the simple truth that 2 hearts, beating together, could overcome anything. Sarah fell asleep in her husband's arms, grateful for every moment that had brought her here, grateful for the sister who had taught her about love, grateful for the niece who had given her purpose, grateful for the cowboy who had shown up when she needed him most and stayed to build a life. Most of all, she was grateful for the lesson that had carried them through everything, the wisdom Margaret had passed down, that Emily had repeated, that had become their family motto: 2 hearts are better than one alone. It was true in grief and joy, in struggle and triumph, in every moment of the life they'd built together. And as Sarah drifted into sleep, she knew that truth would carry forward into the next generation, and the one after that, a legacy more valuable than money, or land, or any material thing. The legacy of love, of family, of hearts joined together to weather whatever storms might come. It was enough. It was everything. It was the happy ending she'd never thought possible on that terrible day when she stood at a grave and promised to raise a child she barely knew how to care for. But she'd done it. They'd done it together, and in the doing, they'd found not just survival, but joy. Not just existence, but life in its fullest, richest sense. They'd found each other, and that had made all the difference. The story that had begun with loss had become a story of love. The woman who had buried her sister had found a husband who was her partner in every sense. The child who had lost her parents had gained a family that would love and support her through all her life. The drifting cowboy had found his home. Two hearts, beating as one, had proven better than either could have been alone, and they lived the rest of their days in the warmth and certainty of that truth, surrounded by the family they'd built and the love they'd fought so hard to protect. In the end, that was the only thing that mattered, not the struggles they'd overcome, or the money they'd saved, or the business they'd built. Just love. Simple, profound, world-changing love. The kind of love that turned tragedy into triumph, strangers into family, and two broken hearts into one whole and unbreakable bond. And so they lived, happily and gratefully, for all the years given to them. Together.